Broadcasting live from the Business Radio X studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for Atlanta Business Radio, spotlighting the city's best businesses and the people who lead them.
Lee Cantor here with Katie Galley and another episode of Atlanta Business Radio, but this is our very special Supply Chain Now radio episode. How you doing, Katie?
I'm doing great, Lee. Thanks so much. And yeah, you're right. It's time for Supply Chain Now radio, powered by APICS Atlanta. Broadcasting live from the supply chain capital of the Southeast, Atlanta, Georgia, Supply Chain Now radio focuses on the best of all things supply chain, the people, the technology, the best practices, and the critical issues of the day.
Good stuff. Now, I got with me my partner in crime, Mr. Scott Luton. How you doing, buddy?
Good morning. Glad to be back.
Got a full house here today.
Full house and a home run lineup as usual. And we're going to walk around the room and introduce each of our guests real quick here before we dive into the top 4 things you need to know about supply chain. So good morning. Our first guest will be Alan Amling, VP of Corporate Strategy at UPS. Good morning, Alan.
Good morning. Good to be here.
Glad to have you. Next guest will be Elizabeth Vamos, Georgia State graduate student. She's also an organizational psychologist, which I practiced at from last month, right? Hit every syllable there. And also doing some great work at CDC as it relates to leadership, right?
Yes, and I would be amiss. I do go to UGA, so the Bulldogs would be upset.
Well, good morning. Glad you're here, as usual, Liz. And then finally, our cleanup hitter will be Tyler Bowser, a U.S. United States Air Force veteran and veteran community ambassador with VEO Atlanta. Good morning, Tyler.
Yeah, good morning, Scott. Thanks for having me.
We're seeing each other every other day, so
pretty much.
But thanks for joining us here today and sharing more about that critical mission that VEO is driving for the veterans community. All right, so before we conduct each segment with our 3 guests here today, I do want to share some news from the supply chain world. So we're going to tackle the top 4 things that you need to know in supply chain. All right, so the number one topic that we really want to lead off with, we've talked about this before. Of course, the hurricane season has been a tough one for the U.S. and the Western Hemisphere. So Puerto Rico is not the lead news story that it was for a number of weeks. It still should be. I came across an interesting article from the Wall Street Journal that kind of gave an update in a nutshell of what's going on the island country of Puerto Rico. So a third of hospitals in Puerto Rico are still running on generators. Of the island's 5,073 miles, only 392 miles are open as of last week. Holy cow. Clean drinking water is still heavily limited. Cell phone service has been disrupted, which further has hampered the communication and coordination efforts. So as we've mentioned in earlier shows, one great organization out there, it's been doing great work, especially providing supply chain infrastructure to assisting the relief efforts, is allenaid.org. So to all of our listeners, we encourage you, especially if you're in supply chain and you have access to resources, check out allenaid.org. And probably most importantly, just be aware, just because it falls off the news cycle, there's still a lot of suffering that's going on there, and they need a lot of help. So that's our lead story as it relates to the supply chain space. All right, number 2, on a much lighter note, Tesla. Anyone heard of Tesla?
Maybe.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Does anyone drive a Tesla?
Not yet.
In a couple of years.
Okay,
I'm on the list.
That might very well change, and I'll tell you why. So the supply chain for electric cars is set to expand dramatically. Tesla announced in the past few days a new agreement to build electric cars in Shanghai in a wholly owned factory. This is the first deal of its kind in China for a foreign automaker, and it's expected to slash production costs for Tesla as well as some shipping costs. We'll defer to Alan's expertise there, as well as for consumers, all the consumers in this room. It is expected to reduce the final price tag on Tesla's electric vehicles. So in the bigger picture, it's going to give Tesla a base to grow its Chinese business and export to the region. So big news there. We're still, all of us are kind of monitoring the adoption of not just electric vehicles, but autonomous vehicles. We'll kind of see how that goes, but big move for Tesla. Number 3, top 4 things known in supply chain. Back here in the States, we talk regularly about the PMI, the Purchasing Managers Index. This is a monthly report produced by the Institute for Supply Management, ISM. They do good work over there, a fellow industry association. So the PMI basically gives a pulse of the manufacturing industry's activity. They released recently that the national PMI was 58.8 in August, which is the highest reading since April of 2011. So that's good news. Again, as we've mentioned before, anything over 50 generally is seen as expansion in the manufacturing economy. And more locally, according to Kennesaw State University, the PMI in Georgia was 58.6 in August. So also good news. Looks like a lot of great expansion, which gives supply chainers problems to solve, right? If manufacturing's humming along, that's good news for us. And finally, if we have all heard anything in the last few weeks, we've heard about Amazon HQ2, right? Everybody familiar with that? As we all know, it's a big new headquarters that Amazon's looking to be building. Everybody and their brother is competing to get the 50,000 jobs that they're promising.
Only 238.
Only 230. Oh, you heard. Okay. Yeah, that was a neat figure. And there was a great YouTube video that the Georgia Economic Development Team put out that showed them, y'all might have seen this, showed them delivering the Atlanta proposal. Really neat stuff. So we delivered that proposal last week. A lot of credible organizations are giving Atlanta a great shot of landing, which is a pretty big project. From Moody's to Deloitte, the Brookings Institution, all giving Atlanta a great shot at landing the project. The decision is going to be revealed in 2018, as Lee said. 200 and how many?
I thought it was 238.
238 cities are vying. And what I read earlier, and I read on the internet, so it's got to be true. The HQ2 for Amazon, number one, is going to be on the scale of Amazon's Seattle headquarters, right? So pretty big deal. But between the 50,000 employees that's projected to bring online and their families, if it is built in Georgia, it would immediately become, wherever it is, the 9th largest city in the state. So pretty neat stuff. Hopefully some great economic development impacts beyond just the jobs themselves. So we'll sit on the edge of our chair and await Amazon's decision. So those are the top 4 things to know. Not all the things to know in supply chain, but 4 that certainly caught my eye.
Now, is it hard for you to get that list together every month?
Well, I can only count to 4, so I have to stop there. But there's something for everybody within the supply chain, and it's so neat to be part of a true supply chain capital that is Atlanta. And we have a good time with talking about the supply chain capital of the East Coast. That's a very arguable claim. But especially from a technology standpoint, Atlanta is a world-class city, both generally from a technology standpoint, but also supply chain technology. And that's one of the things we're going to dive into with our first guest here. So here on Supply Chain Now Radio, we're really pleased to be featuring Alan Amling. Again, he's VP of Corporate Strategy with a little company named UPS. Good morning again, Alan.
Good morning.
So glad to have you here. UPS has been a great supporter and participant in APICS Atlanta programming going back for as long as I've been a volunteer. Elba Pereira Gallagher, as we all know, is a proud UPSer.
Yes.
I think it's been how many years? 20 or I think our 20-year anniversary is coming up.
Yeah, I think it's around.
Yeah, Elba's going to choke me if I don't have that right. But we're big fans of UPS.
Well, she's not a rookie anymore.
That's right. So let's talk about what's going on in UPS's world.
So, one of the things that I want to talk about today is something that you might have heard about, but not associated it with supply chain, and that's 3D printing, also known as additive manufacturing. And you might wonder, so why is UPS, this package delivery and logistics company, into on-demand manufacturing? And that's really what we call it. We don't call it additive or 3D printing. We call it on-demand manufacturing. And essentially, just real briefly, 3D printing is laying layer upon layer of material, whether it's a metal or a polymer, and then curing that in some way with heat to create a piece or a part.
And that could be any material, right?
Absolutely. They're coming out. Actually, a lot of the the greatest advancements in 3D printing right now are actually on the material side.
Mm-hmm.
Because
some people picture those little plastic things, and
Yeah.
maybe that's where it started. But now it can be cement, it can be steel, right? It can be any material.
Yeah, it's so interesting you say that, because 3D printing has actually been around since the 80s. And so people associate 3D printing with like this brittle plastic that you can break in your hand. They don't associate it with the steel fuel nozzle that is on every GE Leap engine.
Right. That's not the first thing that pops in their head, right?
That's on the Dreamliner, right? And one of the reasons that's driven that is that the patent protection that those companies had that originally invented it in the 80s had gone away, and we're just seeing an explosion in innovation around technologies and materials, and when 3D printing has been primarily used to date for like prototyping and models and things like that, which is interesting, but for us it wasn't compelling. When we saw that the technology and the materials were getting to a point where, hey, this is going to impact industrial production, parts that go into pieces of equipment that people have a warranty on, have a service contract on, have their brand name on, then it's a whole different story, right? Because then there's consistent quality that has to happen. And so at the time when we started our 3D printing, we realized that while we're logistics experts, we're not manufacturing experts. So we had the foresight through our senior executives to invest in a company called Fast Radius, also based here in Atlanta, and they are additive manufacturing specialists. And what we've done essentially is take their manufacturing capability and integrate it within our global logistics facility, or global logistics network. So I'll give you an example. Our first factory we put up in May of 2015 in Louisville, Kentucky, in our supply chain campus, which is just moments away from our all points hub for the U.S. in Louisville. So we can actually print till midnight. We have a 1 a.m. poll, and we can get the part anywhere in the U.S. by the next morning, right? And so, speed and quality go hand in hand. And so one of the ways that we're achieving speed is by integrating it into our logistics network. But
and Alan, I saw where GoPro, which everyone's heard of, the leading camera, action camera product in the world, they see a lot of value in that next day prototype delivery. What you're talking about, that print and ship capability, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you think about how people use GoPros. They've got to stick that GoPro camera on like different helmets and pieces of equipment, and all of those are custom. So if you had to do that, if you had to create a mold for that, or if you had to create machining for that, it would be extremely, extremely expensive. With 3D printing, we always say there's no cost for complexity, because for us, whether it's we're making one of the part or 100 of the parts, the setup cost is the same. But I'll back up a little bit. When we did the original investment in 3D printing, I was heading up marketing for a global logistics and distribution business, and one of the parts of that business is called service parts logistics. And so we have 1,000 field stocking locations all over the world where customers store their critical parts, because if a server or an MRI machine goes down, you not only have to have the technician there, but you have to have the parts there. Well, we know, because those parts are stored in our facilities, there's tremendous amount of those parts that turn very slowly or not at all.
Right.
And there really wasn't a good solution for it, right? Because, if I had an MRI machine and I was moving to the next model, all the tooling and molds for that product are destroyed. So you have a purchasing manager that has to make a decision on, how many parts they're going to need to serve that piece of equipment for the next 10 years, 15
Right, they got to
years.
forecast this, right?
Exactly. And it's a horrible forecast.
Right. It's just guesswork.
It's complete guesswork, right? And
The dirty F word.
right. And the thing is, they're only going to get the call if they run out of parts.
Exactly.
Right.
We need one more. It's like, that's like the worst feeling.
No, exactly. And so they have way too much inventory. And
right, they probably have way too much of certain things and not enough of other things.
That's right. That's right. And so there really wasn't a good solution to, just having too much stock.
Right.
And, we know from our customers that inventory is the devil, right? Everyone wants to reduce inventory. And so we really see this as, and this is why UPS is involved, as a supply chain solution,
right,
as opposed, on-demand manufacturing is a supply chain solution.
Because you can print something from 10 years ago, right? Like
absolutely.
You don't have to store it.
Right.
You could just make it when you need it, if you ever need it.
Right. Yeah. And we, I've been meeting with folks from heavy equipment manufacturing and aerospace and the military, and these folks are trying to keep equipment going that might already be 30, 40 years old. And the company that supplied the parts isn't in business anymore, doesn't supply it anymore, right? Right. So we think that is
that's a game changer, right? That changes it. The whole way you just visualize how it works.
Absolutely. And the reality is we're making the supply chain more efficient. And and you might say, well, UPS, don't you store and ship stuff? Isn't that how you make
that's like your bread and butter,
right? Isn't that how you make money? And that's true. But we've been doing this for years. When you talk about making a supply chain more efficient, can we take down the number of warehouses? Can we reduce the number of runs to service your for your customer? It's all about efficiency, and we think this is another tool in the toolbox.
Now, is the speed there where you can produce these things in fast enough? Yeah.
So the speed is there for, I would say, for polymers, right? And so the new technology is just incredible. There's a company called Carbon 3D that we're using right now, and I know I can't show viewers on the radio what it looks like, but if you could if you've seen Terminator 2 and the bad guy reforming, it's kind of what it looks like. It essentially pulls the product out of a vat of liquid, and it's about 100 times faster than what had been currently available on the market. So I think polymers are there. Metals are not there yet. So a metal, a metal product of, let's say, even like a 5-inch by 5-inch cube, may take over a day to print. So that's not quite there, but there's some really interesting technologies. One is Desktop Metals out of MIT that is using a different process to speed up the manufacturing of metals. And so, one of the points that we want to make is that it's if you look at the universe of products in your business today where 3D printing applies, and you can make a really strong business case, the baskets of products relative to your total inventory is rather small. But we see that growing rapidly in the future, and we're encouraging our customers to get in now because there are process changes that you need to make. And if you don't make this now before we hit the hockey stick, you're going to be left behind. And that's why UPS is in it, right? Because we see this change coming. Our choice isn't whether we like the change or not. It's what we're going to do about it, right? And that's why we jumped in.
But I think if you're a supply chain practitioner, a lot of what I've heard at least is options is a great thing. And you want to be able to add or make your supply chain as nimble as flexible as possible, especially if you're dealing. I like how you put no cost for complexity. It sounds like to me that a lot of the folks that may tap into this new initiative with UPS may be able to enhance and improve their businesses without having to invest in heavy traditional tooling, this, that, and the other. And even better, they're able to experiment quickly because they're getting the prototypes or the parts same day or next day.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Essentially, one of the things that's really game changing about additive manufacturing is it's actually shrinking the distance between supply and demand. So, one of the reasons that we oversupply is because we really don't know what the demand is going to be and where it's going to be. And especially as you get to more customized products, the demand is going to occur before the supply, right? So there's going to be no inventory, and you can that's already beginning to happen. So Adidas just announced a 3D printed shoe that, not only is going to be made for the exact fit of your foot, but they'll be taking 3D scans of your foot and you'll run on a mat and they'll see how your weight is distributed. And they'll be creating soles that are specifically for your foot. And I mean, 10, 15 years from now, people are going to look back and say, you bought shoes off the shelf?
Now, does Adidas also believe no cost for complexity? So are these Adidas shoes going to be pretty inexpensive?
Yeah, so they're talking about these shoes being in the $150 price range. So, that's if you've been to an athletic store. I mean, that's kind of
how much that costs.
That's kind of in the ballpark, right?
Maybe Nike will apply it to the Air Jordans. We'll see.
Hey, all the companies are looking at customization, and we're seeing even from tool manufacturers. And you might think, tool manufacturers, what? Why do you need to customize a hammer? And it's actually the grip. And what we've been told is that one of the greatest causes of accidents on a job site are tools slipping out of the worker's hands. So we're seeing opportunity now that wasn't even imagined when we started this journey.
So and I think it's important to note that creative entrepreneurial ventures are nothing new for UPS. As I was reading, Sci-Fi Works, a drone manufacturing initiative, Deliv, same day delivery. It seems like you are pretty smart about investing in the right disruptive technologies.
Yeah, we're trying to learn, right? And you can't. A lot of these technologies, you can't learn by reading about it. You got to learn by doing. You've got to get your hands dirty. You've got to get into it because, I'll tell you, just with 3D printing, which was another one of these investments that we made in Fast Radius, it allowed us to get out there in front of customers and with a minimum viable product and understand what their questions were and understand what their challenges are to actually adopt this. And it's the first to understand what the question is that typically wins, because companies have the resources to find the answer. They just need to understand the right questions.
What's the problem?
Right?
What's the problem? Right?
Exactly. Yeah. And you don't get that by sitting at your desk.
And that's a great point. And UPS does a great job of identifying those startups to partner with and really creating that ecosystem where, those scrappy startups that are doing interesting things can get on your radar. And not only do you support them, but you might make an investment in them. And so you can do the learning in real life, not in some hypothetical, theoretical world where a lot of companies get bogged down with, hey, we'll just put the smart people in a room somewhere and they'll figure it out, where you're learning from the actual real life examples of people using the stuff.
Yeah, that's right.
Speaking of application, we mentioned Sci-Fi Works, the drone initiative that UPS is involved in. I read earlier that there was a neat disaster relief drone pilot program that UPS, Sci-Fi, and the American Red Cross rolled out in September. What a neat, when we talk about a real world application about what's the problem. We were talking earlier about the infrastructure challenges that Puerto Rico has in addressing in successfully carrying out relief operations. If you don't have roads, your options are very limited. So,
right, and you're an island, and
absolutely,
so you have your own
absolutely.
challenges right there.
Surrounded by big water.
Any early,
Good
early returns, any early results on that drone pilot program?
I have, I haven't seen the results from that pilot from the most recent disaster relief initiative yet, but suffice to say, we do see great application for drones. We don't necessarily see millions of drones descending on downtown Atlanta
dropping one box at a time.
right. But never say never. But that's not what we're looking at right now. It's really disaster relief. It's humanitarian aid. So we have another pilot in Rwanda where we're using drones to deliver critical blood supplies.
Right, medical supplies. Right?
Yeah. And it's the same issue there, right? It's the transportation. There's the infrastructure is not there. The other place we're using it is in super rural areas, right? Where you wouldn't think of it in Atlanta, but when you're in some places in North and South Dakota, you're traveling 30 miles or more between stops. And so that's where we see, a great opportunity to, put a package on a drone, send it to one stop, and we go to our service provider goes to another, and then the drone and the package car meet up and they do it again, and they just become more efficient.
So they're working in concert with the vehicle.
Correct. Yeah. The pilot we have, actually, the drone is mounted on the top of the package car.
Yeah. But you mentioned the F word earlier, forecasting, and I like your spin on how 3D printing could, in many cases, make that to be less the traditional challenge that many supply chain folks deal with. I should shameless pitch here. So to our audience, if you do want to get better at forecasting, APICS has 3 mainline certifications. Chris Barnes would shoot me if I didn't bring this up. CPIM, CLTD, CSCP, in particular the CPIM and the CSCP spend a good deal of time wrapping best practices around the forecasting challenge. So to our audience, check that out. Speaking of Elba Pereja-Gallagher, earlier a proud UPSer, she has her CSCP certification. I'm sure if she were here, she'd say the same thing. So, but really pleased to, it's neat to not only be part of an APICS organization that benefited from UPS involvement like today and all of our programming, but to be part of a supply chain market where one of the headquarters, one of the teams that has such a big investment in Atlanta is out there doing big things, is on the leading edge of many of the technology applications and deployments, and not just playing it safe. Right. That's a neat thing.
Right. It speaks to the culture of UPS.
Absolutely. Yeah. So before we transition to Elizabeth, we got some neat stuff lined up with her in the High Performance Minute. Any last minute, any challenges to supply chain community or the APICS community?
Well, so, for us, the biggest challenge, along with 3D printing is just awareness, right? It's just awareness. And so we need people to understand that this new technology is out there, that there are people that can help, that it's not, you can get into it without investing in a bunch of assets. And my biggest thing is just get in the game, right? Start to learn, get in the game. And you've got people like UPS and Fast Radius that are here to help you.
Great. And learn by doing, not just by watching and reading on the sidelines.
That's right. That's right.
Well, Alan, it's been a pleasure to have you here today. Again, appreciate your support, and we look forward to more news on these exciting initiatives.
Fantastic.
Okay, so now we want to transition over to a regular item, that's part of our Supply Chain Now Radio. We're featuring once again Elizabeth Vamos, a member of APICS Atlanta Gender Gap Task Force, which is chaired by Elba Pereja-Gallagher of UPS and Show Me 50. Elizabeth is an organizational psychologist, and as we mentioned, she's doing some really neat things from a leadership perspective at CDC. We feature a High Performance Minute each month on Supply Chain Now Radio, which basically offers helpful advice for professionals and their organizations to get better at what they do. So, Elizabeth, what are we tackling today?
All right. Well, as you were saying earlier about Puerto Rico, and unfortunately it hasn't gotten the time on the news, it has been. Gender issues have, and we all know the headlines about Harvey Weinstein and all that stuff that people kind of like to talk about in the water cooler. And it's kind of, a lot of people come to me as an IO psychologist and they're kind of like, how do I talk about gender? How do I kind of bring it about in a conversation without kind of getting people upset about it? So I just kind of point to the statistics and kind of tell people, well, if you know about your organization and you know about what's going on actually in the world and the stats, then you're able to kind of bring an unbiased perspective and you can kind of open the dialogue. Because a lot of people get scared when it comes to gender and they don't want people to bite one's head off, and it can be fishy waters. So it's to know, you need to know the facts so you can make an informed decision and be able to talk about it. So I'm a firm believer. So I'm going to be talking about today, I'm going to be talking about McKinsey & Co., which we all know they're very head in IO psychology and consulting firm. So the McKinsey and Lean In, they published their annual survey of women in the workplace. So they studied HR data from over 200 companies representing 12 million employees and surveyed about around like 700,000 men and women employees on their perspectives. So here are like two stats they don't get as much like airplay when we talk about gender. So nearly 50% of men in companies, where only 10% of leaders are women, feel already that women are well represented. So this is actually a really big issue because it's really hard to drive change if people don't even think that there is change to even begin with. So a lot of people say, oh, I have that one female manager. I have that one CEO female. So they see one person as opposed to, that's only 20% if you have 5 people, 20% and 80%.
And everybody sees the same person.
Right, exactly. It's that one person, that one woman of color, that one. Yeah, so it's just checking off a box. And we don't need to be checking off a box right now. We need to be making it equal, making that jump to 50%. So we can make progress if companies are more transparent about their diversity statistics. So that's why I'm talking about that. So everyone can see the fact that like there are so few women and minorities represented in top leadership positions. So you can kind of see like what to fix. So another stat that came from the article was...
So Liz, if I can interrupt real quick. So kind of a common theme from what Alan was sharing, but what's the problem, right?
Right.
Gotta have the data.
Yeah.
Just as you mentioned, and the awareness that there is a problem. Right.
Yeah. So that's the biggest thing is a lot of people just don't know. They just don't know. And it's not putting blame onto anyone. It's just people don't know where to find the information. And as an IO psychologist practitioner, I kind of always look at research. I'm looking at data all the time. But there's a couple like good things that people can do to keep informed. I mean, McKinsey, they always come out with this probably about every year. So you can kind of get to know on that. And they're well known. Deloitte does a couple of things. So there's a couple big companies that come out and study gender and just kind of like keep informed. You don't have to be a Google scholar, to know everything, but just kind of keep well informed on that and kind of actively looking for information so you can be well informed about the issue. And then, so another stat that was also not surprising towards me, but I think for others, is that women are not leaving their companies at higher rates than men. So for the longest time, people think, oh, well, women are transitioning, they're going to get families, they're not really staying at these companies, and it's completely false. So roughly 80% of all employees, men and women, who plan to leave their company in the next 2 years intend to stay in the workplace. And so notably, just as men and women say, like, they leave to focus on their family, and it's relatively no number. It's just only 2%, which is really low.
Much lower than probably what the person off the street would guess.
Correct. People would usually think of a very high number, and they when you talk about gender, they're like, oh, because they want to be with the family, and it's actually when they're actually planning the next 2 years, it's definitely not. It's 2%. That's a super low statistic. So, yeah. So McKinsey kind of offers like a couple straightforward solutions, and I picked a couple that I really did like. So they also talk about investing in gender bias training. So that kind of goes back to Show Me 50, which is what I'm working closely with Elba with. So we do gender bias training, and we tell people like some of the facts and like how they can be proactive in their specific organization in order to talk about these hot button issues and something that people really need to be well informed at. So if people are able to join, we love new members. That's Show Me 50. You can just type it in, showme50.org. And I can only say great things about it. We do lean in circles once a month, and we talk about this, and we give the stats behind it. I give the stats behind it, and Elba, leads with, her perspective from UPS in 20 years and kind of kind of branching forward and seeing, okay, this is the issue. Let's do something about it.
So, and so part of, as we were talking in the kind of the pre-show conversation, the Gender Gap Task Force is one of 3 service initiatives that APICS Atlanta has kicked off. And we're really tickled to be partnering with showme50.org, Elba and Elizabeth and the task force members to do something about it. Right?
Right, exactly.
The gender bias training that Elizabeth mentioned, we thus far, and we're probably 3 or 4 months into this task force initiative with our chapter, we have rolled out a webinar or 2, and we have what's in the hopper is a lunch and learn and a one-day workshop also around the gender bias training and really in the bigger picture, policies of inclusion. We talk about there's something for everybody in supply chain, and how can we work together to make sure everyone that wants to take advantage of that can jump in and be successful.
Right, exactly. And so just on that note, people always think, when you're building a team, and I learned in graduate school, when you're building a team, you like to be people that are like you, one of us, right? But it's actually more profitable for businesses to build heterogeneous teams. So those board members that have women of color, and all these different backgrounds, men of color, they make a lot more money than just homogeneous all white men in the room. So, so we want to make sure, ensure hiring and promotions or reviews are fair. So that's another thing that Mackenzie talks about. And also senior leaders must be visible and vocal about supporting gender diversity in leadership. So they must talk about it in meetings, but most importantly, take action. Because yes, you can say, I really want to do this in the next year or so when we hear people say it, but they need to actually take action and step forward and make a gender task force and kind of go forward and kind of do that. So they need to talk about why the business results are better. What I was speaking to. But a really cool statistic that I saw that I wanted to share was that, so they broke down each kind of industry of the pipeline. So how many people come in, women, and then how many eventually get a C-level suite. So transport, travel, and logistics, so infrastructure. So in the very entry level, about 53% of women come in. So that's a good thing. That's a good statistics. 53% is more than men. So yay, good. But the further down you go, it gets really bad. And then about the C-level suite, it's about 19%, which is, it's good. It's a good start. Yes, but it definitely needs to be more enhanced. And then so the automotive and industrial manufacturing, what you were talking about earlier. So it's about 26%, which is not very common. Women usually don't go into manufacturing. So then at the end, it's only about 13% of women in C-level suites. So the biggest thing that Mackenzie talks about is the hiring process. And I actually talked with one of the head recruiters for a firm, and he was saying a lot of women aren't getting the callbacks, and he is actively calling women back. So he was saying that he feels that his company, that he sees women candidates and he deals with female engineers and he deals with these type of people, and they're just not getting the callbacks. So it's kind of really just being aware of it and starting it from the get-go. Yeah.
So I heard, so if I can summarize some of what you're sharing there. First off, know the problem.
Correct.
Right? Don't put your head in the sand, like unfortunately a lot of folks do, right?
Right.
Number 2, don't buy into the myths and the old adages. Don't make the old the
fake
same.
News, right?
No fake news. No assumptions.
Right.
Be careful with the assumptions, right? Allen Iverson's favorite, you got to practice. So we talked about the gender bias training. If you don't practice these new ways of thinking, you're going to fall into the same old way of doing things, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Think differently, but also build teams differently, right?
Correct.
And then, of course, the overarching thing I heard throughout the High Performance Minute today was do something, take action.
Exactly.
Start somewhere.
Right. So, a great example is the CDC right now. So I started working with them and a couple, 2 other people, my cohort right now in my graduate school. And they're starting from the ground up. There's some companies that don't have the luxury of starting from the ground up, but they don't have any type of leadership assessment program. So we're coming in, usually they consult out, we're trying to make it in so they can be internal assessing. So we're starting from, okay, well, this is exactly what we want to look in leaders. We have a couple competencies. We're going to assess that. We're going to see specifically what we want in a future leader. And luckily, we're able to weed out the biases because, you have a bunch of IO psychologists coming in and saying, okay, this is a bias. Let's make sure we look at it from a different way. So, if people aren't able to start from the ground up and build a whole leadership session, which takes a very, very long time, You just need to do active things. So informing yourself, if there is a practice that you're doing that's not gender friendly, kind of like revamp it or revise it. So just kind of knowing exactly what to do and knowing the right people to outsource and knowing when you need help and reach out and joining great organizations like APICS and the Gender Task Force and Show Me 50 and starting at your level and starting this conversation so we can kind of get the ground running.
Perfect. And if anyone wants to compare notes with Elizabeth and Elba, what's a good contact?
Showme50.org is a great way to contact us. You can definitely directly email, Elba there. You can also contact me as well. My name is Elizabeth, ELIZABETH, .vamos, VAMOS, @gmail.com. And you have any questions regarding anything I talked about today, you want to learn a little bit more, how you can get active, definitely contact me or Elba, and we'd be happy to share our thoughts and insights with you.
Perfect. Really appreciate the passion and all of y'all's leadership as we try to work together to move the needle in the Metro Atlanta area. So thank you, Elizabeth.
Yes, of course. Thank you.
All right. Moving on to our cleanup hitter today. We're real pleased here on Supply Chain Now Radio. Service is certainly the theme for today's show, and we're really pleased to have Tyler Bowser, a United States Air Force veteran and the Veteran Community Ambassador for VEO Atlanta. Good morning, Tyler.
Hey, good morning, Scott.
Glad to have you. So I thought we'd start with some folks. One of the things we identified early on in our partnership and relationship is do folks in Atlanta know about the VEO? So that's what we're working to address. But what is it, and what do y'all do?
That's right. Well, Veterans Empowerment Organization is a true street-to-home homeless program for veterans here in Atlanta. Typically, when I go out, I'll talk to a crowd of 100 or 200 people. Only one or two people really raise their hand and have ever known about us. We've been in Atlanta since 2008, truly helping to end the homeless veteran population here. Started by a gentleman by the name of Franz Fortune. He's a Haitian immigrant, and he came here to the United States basically with nothing and was able to really capitalize on the American dream and received a degree in social work. So when he wasn't out doing real estate, he was actually working with the United Way here in Atlanta. So long story short, Franz couldn't understand why all these veterans would come back and then end up on the street for one reason or another, and they weren't being taken care of. He thought that the VA and the Veterans Administration and that the government would take care of these warriors, and that just simply wasn't the case. So he started with two individuals and brought them into his home, got them jobs at Home Depot. And after a couple of weeks, his wife said, that's enough of that. And so he put them up into a hotel for about a month. And then with the help of the United Way, was able to obtain a grant to go ahead and lease out a home that had 4 bedrooms. So he expanded it from 2 gentlemen to 8. And then we're at a place today where we have 100 beds on our campus. And then we also support 14 female veteran-led families across the street in leased townhomes. And then one of the other things that we were seeing is that women in combat and women that are going downrange in Afghanistan and Iraq, they're experiencing the same kind of traumas that men are. So we're starting to see a growing population that's actually disproportionate to the men's population, and it's not being really addressed out there in the current market for homeless veterans. So typically when we think about a homeless vet, we think of a man. And we have a Department of Labor workforce readiness program, and it's open to all veterans. And we were noticing that some of the people that were graduating in our classes were females, and they were living in their home, or they were living in a car, or they were living at a friend's home on the couch. And we were able to get them back to where they were ready to go back to work, but they didn't have any place to go. They didn't have any place to take a shower. They didn't have any place to get ready for success. So we started a new program about 4 months ago that addressed single females without dependents. And so that's been extremely successful. And the interesting thing is that the women that are coming through our program are graduating at a quicker rate than our men are, which is awesome.
Of course.
So, exactly. That's right. That's right.
So 100 beds for the core street to home aspect of the operation. Is that right?
We have two programs for men right now on our campus. We have 46 beds, and that is for what is called Transitional Assessment Program. That's a traditional 90 to 120 day program. It's a true street to home. So we just recently did an outreach with United Way and the help of the city of Atlanta. Go out and actively look for homeless folks. And we will take non-veterans as well at our program. So we went out, we did an outreach, woke up people early about 5:30 in the morning, said, hey, we've got a hot meal and a place for you to stay. Would you like to come? And the most interesting part about this, Scott, is that about 8 out of 10 people that I've actually gone and worked with do not want to leave the street. So that's an interesting statistic. That's my own statistic. But we'll go out, and then the people that do want to come, we'll bring them over and get them in processed. So our true transitional program is 46 beds. And then we have something called supportive permanent housing on our campus. The supportive permanent housing allows individuals that do have income. Many veterans do have disability income, or they'll have Social Security income. Older veterans that are just getting onto Social Security. So they have a smaller amount of income. It's not enough for them to actually go out and get their own apartment, but they can stay on our campus for as long as they want. The rents are usually $400 to $475 a month, and that includes 3 meals a day. Supportive case management. We have a mental health care clinician on site. We have a substance abuse training program that is actively 4 nights a week. They meet and then also go to meetings off-site. So this is really a holistic 360-degree approach to trying to treat homelessness not as just a housing problem, but as a human problem.
What's the scope of the problem?
The scope of the problem right now is it's getting better. Right now, there's...
Yeah, let me shift gears a minute, because I think what may be real compelling to address that question is, Tyler, talk about your story a little bit. That's really what got Jason Moss and I our attention early at a Atlanta event where you did such a great job in front of 5,000 people. It felt like, telling your journey. So we don't have the same 30 minutes a day, but give us a snapshot of your journey.
Sure. So I'm a United States Air Force veteran, and I had a great 4 years in the Air Force. It was short, but it was fantastic, and it was filled with just a lot of success. So much success that in the last 11 days that I was getting ready to get out, I found myself in a flight suit and a G suit, getting in the back seat of an F-15 and going for an incentive ride. So I got out of the Air Force and really felt like I had this amazing group of people always cheering for me and coaching me and training me to be the best, because they wanted to be the best and they wanted to be around the best people. Well, when I got out of the Air Force, I went into corporate America, and this was right at the end of the first .com era. And so I lost 3 jobs in 1 year. But like everybody was out for themselves, not really looking out for each other. I had a big struggle with that. So I ended up going back to school, got my bachelor's degree in information technology. At the same time, was working at a little coffee company called Starbucks. So I worked there, and they still had the same kind of culture, though. They had this great culture where they wanted to shape and mold and support everybody that worked for Starbucks. And they had a mission: serve great coffee, right? I was lacking the mission that the Air Force really gave me. So I had some tragedies that happened in my life. And just real briefly, I'd lost 2 children, and basically over the course of 3 years. And I was brokenhearted and went insane. And so not only was I dealing with that, but on the backside, I didn't know that I was dealing with bipolar disorder with severe depression, and then fueling it with alcohol at the same time. So after my daughter, Taylor Kay, passed away, I went over to Afghanistan as a contractor, spent about 3.5 years over there. Kind of had a buddy that said, Bowser, why don't you just come over here? You can focus in on the mission, and you can have your healing time. So I did that. And finally, after about 3.5 years of experiencing everything war has to offer, I said it was time for me to come back. And I landed a dream job in Houston, Texas. I was an operations manager for a communications company that just dealt in oil and gas. And it was great. I was doing everything that I did in the military. I had 11 technicians. They were all veterans. We were installing radios onshore and offshore, moving ships, middle of the desert, wherever. And I really liked it. In 2014, 2015, though, the price of oil and gas dropped significantly. And it was great for the consumer. It was great for the economy, but about 100,000 people in that industry lost their jobs, and I was one of them. And so I had now accumulated some pretty good PTSD from being in Afghanistan, dealing with bipolar disorder untreated, dealing with the death of my children, and then fueling it with amounts of alcohol. Lost my job and went on an epic bender. And so I found myself here in Atlanta. I used to sell software here and thought I could get a job back in the IT realm, but drinking was more important to me. And I ended up burning a lot of relationships, ended up overstaying my welcome at friends and family's homes. So I ended up living in my car. And on July 5th of last year, I ended up getting my car repossessed and went to Fort McPherson and said, "Hey, I'm Tyler Bowser. I'm an Air Force veteran. I've got no place to stay." So I ended up at the VEO after about 5 days downtown at Gateway Center, and just decided it's time for me to make a new way in life. Got sober through the help of the VEO, through the help of VA, went through a substance abuse training program, and then just took advantage of all the programs that VEO had for me. Franz Fortune, the executive director, came to me and said, "Come share your story with my board of directors." I did that. And he said, "I want you to come on my team. I want you to go share the story of VEO, what we're doing here, share your story." And so I've been doing that for about the last year ever since. And I've gotten to speak in front of amazing crowds. I've got to meet amazing people. I've had breakfast with local Fortune 500 CEOs. I've been to the Federal Reserve Bank. By the way, they won't let you have any of their money, by the way.
No samples.
No samples.
I was hoping I was going to get your autograph this morning. I mean, it's really, despite the tragic story that we all know, that it's not just Tyler, the veteran community, a lot of what he shared, it's impacting the community. And we wonder why we're seeing some of the numbers out there and some of the other tragedies. But it's really neat to hear the support that the business community is really coming to the VEO's missions and supporting and giving you the platform. And that's really one of the things we're trying to do from an APICS Atlanta perspective is we're a nonprofit with a nonprofit budget. I wish we could write a check and make that next housing and new cafeteria happen overnight. Maybe there's a 3D printer that we can tap into. But we want to shine a spotlight on this critical, just grassroots work they are doing in Atlanta, right here in Atlanta, and so we've really, between APICS Atlanta and Georgia Manufacturing Alliance, we've committed to really trying to build the platform for the VEO so that we get more attention, we get more, hopefully, support, sponsor, whatever helps you further and take it from 46 beds on that transitional assessment initiative to 4,600, right? Because the demand, not to be, too cowed, it's the tip of the iceberg, right? And the challenges we're seeing. So, as a follow up to Lee's question, Tyler, I'd love to get your take based on your experiences. If you had to pull one or two aspects of the challenge that you overcame, and had to apply them to the greater veteran community, what are some of those big challenges that veterans generally kind of across the board are facing?
Well, the neat thing that VEO has really eliminated is that there are no questions asked up front. Typically in the VA, they ask you all the questions and then they'll supply you with the services. We do the opposite. We supply the services first and then we ask the questions. We don't take any, we only take private dollars to support our organization. We don't take any government dollars. And the reason being is that the VA will dictate to us who we can and cannot help. And this is interesting. I just found out these statistics from the United Way of Greater Atlanta. The average homeless person in Atlanta costs the city $14,000 a year. Wow. So by taking those homeless veterans, we've served a little over 4,000 veterans in the last 9 years. Just this past year, we did about 450 veterans came through as clients and moved on and graduated. So the economic impact locally is $5.6 million last year that VEO had directly on all of the services here in Atlanta. The VEO is doing the work that they can do because they're not encumbered by government bureaucracies. And we understand that the VA has those reasons. They have to account for every dollar that they spend. We just know that it can be done more compassionately. And that is the whole focus on our mission, and to make sure that we are truly giving the underserved veterans unconditional support. So not making any conditions up front.
And for you to be part of a team and to have such a clear mission, it goes back to your core values of you personally, right?
Absolutely. This has been the most rewarding work that I've ever done outside of when I was in active duty Air Force and the mission that I supported there. But to come back here, I actually turned down another job doing business development for an IT company up here because I felt so strongly. I mean, Franz Fortune literally took me under his wing. He took me out one night, bought me clothes. I had nothing. I had 4 shirts, 2 pairs of shorts, and a pair of flip-flops when I got there. He took me out, personally bought me some business clothes, paid for my driver's license to get reinstated. And so I knew that at this point, God, for me, had allowed for a lot of things to change in my life. And I found where kind of my niche and my groove, I could use all of my talents that God's given me to kind of move forward and affect something for the better.
Well, I'd love to take the next couple hours and dive deeper. Really, I mean, the thing for us is when we heard Tyler share his journey, and then we went on site and saw and toured the campus and met some of the veterans that are being served. I mean, it hits you like a ton of bricks. You know, why can't we do this on times 10 or times 100? So we're going to do our part and try to give the VEO as much of a platform as we can. And part of that, Tyler, I know that y'all are a couple different events coming up. You're currently raffling off a Harley Davidson that was donated to VEO, right?
That's right.
And so folks can buy raffle tickets at veohero.org, right?
Correct.
And then the big gala is coming up in February, and that's here in Atlanta at where at?
Down at the Piedmont Driving Club.
Okay, Piedmont Driving Club. You can also buy tickets for the gala in February or on the website.
That's correct. So just real quick, a big shout out for, obviously Veterans Day is coming up. It's going to be on November 11th. November 10th, we're having a huge party over at VEO. Our campus is at 373 West Lake Avenue. It's on the west side of Atlanta. We're inviting the entire public to come out. And then on Saturday, we're going to be actually raffling off a brand new Harley Davidson Dyna Street Bob. You can buy your tickets online. It's a $100 donation, gets you in. The odds are going to be really good. So probably only about 125 to 200 tickets are going to be sold. And we'd love to see you support that.
So if you are a crazy person and would like to drive a Harley on the dangerous streets of Atlanta. No, I'm kidding. Of course, I'm kidding. Great effort. The money goes to a wonderful cause. And also, Tyler, if folks want to come out and tour the campus,
they
can
absolutely
reach out to you.
Please reach out to me.
Okay.
You can go on to our website, veohero.org, click on volunteer, and that'll send me an email, or you can call directly down to the campus there. But all of our contact information is on our website, and I'd love to have anybody come out that would like to see our campus. You'll be blown away, truly blown away.
You will, and it'll help really illustrate some of the challenges that we see and hear and experience. So one last event related to the VEO, APICS Atlanta and the Georgia Manufacturing Alliance has combined forces again to support the VEO as much as we can. On November 17th, from 11 a.m. to 1:30, the VEO is going to host on their campus Joe Palmieri of the Coca-Cola Company. So Joe is a member of the Coca-Cola Company team, I think in the quality area, but more relevant, he is president of the Veterans, I always forget the acronym. Affinity Group. There we go, at the Coca-Cola Company. And he's going to come out and share basically some of the lessons learned from their experiences of building and deploying this affinity group, and how are they serving veterans internal to the company, but also what are they doing external. So that's an open event. Again, at the very transparent aims to bring people down to the campus and get them to kind of see what the VEO is doing. So that's November 17th from 11 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. And you can find out information on that at apicsatlanta.org. So Tyler, thanks again for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
A lot more to come. All right, so we're going to wrap up on some upcoming events. Really appreciate all three speakers today. A lot of red meat we could dive into for a lot longer than 15 minutes a pop, but really made for a neat show with a lot of common themes, I thought. That's one of the big things we're always after. So I want to finish on some upcoming events. I really loved how Elizabeth made it about action and how Alan made it. Don't sit back and read about it. Go out and do it. So we're going to give you some opportunities to get out and do it right now. So tomorrow, short notice, the Georgia Manufacturing Summit takes place. There's about 700 folks coming out. I mentioned the Georgia Manufacturing Alliance, who hosts the summit. Great partners for the chapter. I'll be leading a panel session called Trends to Track in Supply Chain. I need my 18th cup of coffee. And Alan, you might find interesting. We're going to be featuring Tandria Bellamy, a fellow UPS executive, on that panel. She's going to be talking about the some best practices related to organizational learning and big new initiatives. So,
fantastic!
Looking forward
She's
to
great.
that. She really is a great person. She's also serves on our executive advisory board. So it's good to tap into that type of perspective. So tomorrow is the Georgia Manufacturing Summit. On 10/26 on Thursday night, we're going to be featuring a meet and greet at the Vista Room in Decatur. Has anyone in this room heard about the Aerotropolis initiative?
Yes.
Okay. we mentioned it a couple times, maybe. So we're going to be featuring Shelley Lamar, the executive director of the Aerotropolis Atlanta Alliance. And she's going to come out and speak to our group along with CSCMP Atlanta and the Transportation Club of Atlanta to talk about what is Aerotropolis and why, and the huge ripple effects it can have, positive ripple effects it can have in the supply chain capital of the East Coast, Atlanta, Georgia. That's 10/26. 11/1, November 1st, we're going to be going out, and speaking of the skills gap, a team of us are going out to talk to 4th and 5th graders at Park Street Elementary on what is supply chain management. So
that's right. Got to start them young.
That's right. You really do. You really do. And then finally, we'll wrap up on this note. On November 17th, we are hosting our next executive roundtable series, Cisco Systems, CISCO, not the food company. There, Jack Allen is going to be hosting a presentation focused on digital logistics, the future of delivery. That's going to be at their Lawrenceville campus. That's a free event. If you're interested in that, please reach out to me at evp@apicsatlanta.org, and we'll make sure we provide all the details. So, Lee, we got to finish on. I said that was last note. There's one other though. Chris Barnes, who pays the bills for these sessions. He's a big part of our APICS certification programs, right? In previous shows, he's talked about the CLTD, right? Certified in Logistics, Transportation, and Distribution, one of the 3 big APICS certifications. Well, we've got about 15 folks signed up for the next 4 Saturday review session. Basically, it helps prepare folks to hit a home run with the APICS CLTD exam, right? You don't want to just go through the training. You want to earn that hard-to-get credential. So our next CLTD class kicks off on November 18th. And all the details are on our website, apicsatlanta.org. But it'll be a great class. There's a great bit of diversity, male, female, sector, you name it, all kind of stuff. So that the best practice sharing during the sessions will be outstanding. So if you want more information on that, you can reach out to me or visit the website or reach out to Chris directly at president@apicsatlanta.org. And that's going to bring my time to a close. So again, thanks to all of our guests for joining us today. Lee.
All right. Well, thank you, Scott, for putting this together. It is a great episode as always, and we look forward to it every month. Supply Chain Now Radio. This is Lee Cantor for Katie Galley. We will see you all next time on Atlanta Business Radio.